There's nothing more pathetic than having a truck that's set up and capable, you know, with a lift and mud tires and all that kind of stuff, is to have it get stuck. It's embarrassing. All your Chevy guys are going to be like, "I'll pull him out." Ford friends, "I'll pull him out." You just like where it's left. Not that I'm a big Dodge fanboy. It's just when you have a four-wheel drive, you want it to work. It's very important. And so one of the things to help make this truck more reliable, because one of the weaknesses that it has is that it's a vacuum actuated four-wheel drive axle lock. And that's pathetic because diesel doesn't produce any vacuum. There's no throttle body, it's wide open all the time. And so that being the case, you have to have a vacuum pump, and the vacuum pump shares between the HVAC and the front axle. And so what you have to do is get rid of the vacuum, because that only works at higher RPMs when the vacuum pump's turning fast. And sometimes you're moving slow when you're in four-wheel drive because it's real technical. So what we do is we replace that with a Posi-Lock kit that allows you to lock it up with a cable. And that works a whole lot better, saves you a lot of frustration and maybe having to use your winch when you didn't plan on it or shouldn't need to. So we'll show you how that's done. So here's essentially what the kit looks like when you've rough assembled it. I've taken the cable, I put the nut on here, I threaded in the bracket that holds it under the dash, and put the bolt through that you use to bolt it to the bottom portion of your dash. You put it essentially where you would put a trailer braking device or something of that nature. You can either screw this. Now I want you to watch here while I'm distracting you over here. See what that does? As this closes, it moves it one way. You move it the other way, it does the same thing to fine adjust. However, when you push a button down, and see that locks it in place, so you can do a fast, easy actuation. You can also fine tune it. It's got a little BB ball bearing, I suspect, and it'll get that ugly thumb out of the way. And it also has like a spiral track that bearing rides on, so you have infinite adjustment in terms of where you have it to set. But that's how it works. And you look, it's got a little bit of a sleeve, like a receiving sleeve, and then at the end of that it has a button pressure sensor. So when this hits that button, it causes your four-wheel drive light to come on once you've wired it to accept this type of a, it basically has these little hooks that go in there. So that's what it looks like. Let's get going. Let's put this thing on the truck. One more explanation is this is where the fork would be, is it would be in between these E-clips. So pretty cool. I'm excited to see how this turns out. The first step in our installation is inside the cab. You go to the right side of the steering column and go below here, and you'll see the very last screw that's there. You got to take out that screw. And as you feel underneath where the screw used to be, there's a little metal backing plate. You take your 5/16 inch drill bit. Watch for wires and things running behind if any aftermarket accessories have been installed. And you drill a hole. It's that easy. Out goes the screw, drill the hole, and then we're ready to mount the holding bracket. The next thing we're going to do is in your instruction sheet, I'll give you a little look at this. It's pretty good, thorough instruction. You got all your warnings and stuff on the front, liability and whatnot. And then you've got your instructions with detailed pictures about where to put the template. See the template there? And how to install the rest. This is a picture of what our bracket is going to look like after we put a bolt through the hole that we just drilled. Here's your template. We're going to cut that out, and we're going to set that in place so that we can cut our hole in the right location. We just cut around the outside. It's pretty easy, no-brainer. What I do is I'll just cut it all the way out and then go back and notch that little part that hooks onto the throttle cable. So you cut this out, and then we'll take it inside the truck, and once we get in there I'll show you what to do. Once you have your paper stencil cut out, the next step is to take it and apply it to the right side of your gas pedal. Hook it up over the throttle cable. You'll find that there's a little black square that the stencil fits onto. That'll give you an idea of where to cut an inch of the insulation away. You just need to cut in a 1-inch square. As you can see on mine, that's the hinge that you see here. So my hole's just slightly above that. So probably my square will be a line across the top of the hinge, up, and then around. So I'll continue to that. Once I do that, I'll put this back in place and I'll know where to drill my hole. You don't want to drill too far out to the right, like out here someplace. As you can see, I folded this too, like it says to fold on the line. You know, if you drill too far to the right or the passenger side, you'll hit a structural web. It will be a lot more difficult for you to drill through. So try to stay close to where the pedal is, where the mark is. The hole in your insulation and the hole that you drill through should look something like this. So once you have the hole drilled here, then you can install the bracket here that we talked about earlier, we drilled a hole for. And you want to put the hole into this first so you have room for your drill, but once it's all together, this is all the hardest parts of the install of the whole kit, is just doing those things right there. Once you've done that, it's pretty well downhill. The next thing that you'll want to do is put things together in a certain order of operations. Because this cable isn't something that you can twist or really mess with in terms of you know, adding things on, it's got to go through all these hoops in the right order. So the first things that you want to do is you want to take your washer that's got all the bites, or I don't know what you call these. It's a gripping washer, a lock washer of some nature. So you'll want to go through here first, the little ring down there, then you put on this, then you put on the nut, and then you put on this, and then you go through the firewall. You'll need to stretch this to get it over, but this is the bushing that prevents this from being eaten by the firewall where we've drilled. So this is how it should look after you drill your hole through there. Put the bracket in place with this provided bolt, nut and washer. You run the cable through this first, and then you thread on the lock washer that you can see here, and then the nut, and then the grommet. Once you have those in place in that order, then start to feed your cable through and run it through the firewall, as you see here. And then go outside to the outside of the firewall and pull it through the rest of the way so that you get a good routing, so that you're not going to be in the way of future mechanical repairs, and that you get a good feed down to where the axle is. So here's what it looks like, and I've got a PA system and I've got a trailer brake, and it's able to still fit in there underneath of those things. So it just makes a straight shot back. You put the grommet in at the firewall. You can replace some of the insulation around there if you want. I don't think I'm going to bother. You do want to make sure you get the grommet in there so it doesn't get chewed up. In terms of routing, this is where it comes out on mine. See, I almost hit the rib there. You can see that I've got grommet all the way around the cable, and I come down underneath of the fuel lines here. Bear with me, I know it's impossible to see, but just come around wide and then swing down underneath. I'll show you from underneath what we've got going on. You have to stay away from hot parts and moving parts, so you come around the front of the motor mount's the main thing, and then down along the axle, and then this is where we'll install the rest. Once you get to this point, this is all the biggest, hardest part, is just getting those holes drilled and running the cable down. Once you've done that, the rest goes really easy. I'll show you here in a minute. All we need to do now is we need to cap the vacuum source to the transfer case switch and install and just bolt up the shift fork here. Before you put the shift fork in, you got to screw it on, and you want to do a little testing before you get down here so you know how many threads. You only put it in, I'd say probably about 5 or 6 threads is all. And before you do that, I need to put my lock nut on this too. If your truck's a diesel like mine, you'll need to locate your vacuum source. You've got a vacuum pump that goes in front of the power steering pump. Follow the line up to here, and you'll see the supply to the vacuum tree, which is the thing that goes across under the wire harness at the firewall under the wiper cowl. Now this you don't want to unhook. This goes to some other things that you need up here, but the one that's closest to the engine on the driver's side, you'll see a cap and then a little elbow. You want to pull off the elbow and then use the supplied vacuum cap and cap that off. Because once you take the vacuum lines off of the dash pod, every time you shift your transfer case into four-wheel drive, it will be shifted that way. Also, you know, for future, if somebody wants to switch it back because they just want one shift and, you know, the risky mess that it was, I don't know why anybody would ever do that, but put a bolt in here just to keep these lines all clean so you don't wind up sucking debris into the vacuum pump in the future. We're now down working on the axle. This line on the top here is the vent line for the differential so that it can breathe. It helps the oil to move properly. Now these two are both vacuum. You could probably just even cut them off or pull them off and cap them, or even, I'm going to pull mine off up here and set them aside. You take an oil drain pan and put it underneath because you may spill. It's not super likely, but it can happen. I'm going to leave all the rest of my hard lines and infrastructure there. I'll cap both of these. So you get your vacuum lines, lay them aside. You're going to have to use a pair of side cuts or something to undo the clamp on your vent. You got to take that off because you're going to use that nipple in your new housing. Now the new housing has a hole for it, but there's nothing there. So pull that off, lay it aside, and you're going to want to extract that little nipple and put it into your new one. And then these bolts are all 11 millimeter. There's two that are at the top, and then there's two that are down here with this plate. And so we'll go ahead and pull those out. If you haven't already disconnected your four-wheel drive indicator, go ahead and unplug that. So I now have all of the bolts removed. There's only 4 of them, just the 2 down here and the 2 at the top. So the next thing I'll do is put something behind it to pry. In this case I'm just going to use a pair of needle nose pliers and then pry back. As you can see, I'm dripping oil, but I've got preparations for that. So, and then same thing on the other side. Just a gentle tug is all you'll need. So when you pull this out, it reveals that little coupler, and this coupler is what hooks the 2 axles together. There's a little pin that goes in between to get them to coast together, but to engage the four-wheel drive you just have the shift fork slide that over onto the other inner axle or intermediate shaft. So what we're doing essentially is we're going from an unreliable vacuum source to a reliable cable actuated source of mechanism. And that gives us a real positive solid lock, but it also enables us to use 2-wheel drive low, which means we put it in 4-wheel drive low on the transfer case and we leave the front axle open. Now this has some unique benefits and advantages. Specifically when you're doing a trailer with a turbo diesel, you don't get a lot of power or torque to do what you need to do until it's wrapped up. You know, if you're going down the highway or whatever, if you're manipulating a heavy trailer, it's very nice to have 2-wheel drive low. Okay, so once we have this out, we need to harvest this to use in the new application. Bear in mind the way that this bends. It bends toward where the high part, or shallow portion is, I guess, however you want to look at it. This is where the cable's going to go in on the next one. So you reach in there and you pry out the E-clips that retain it on the rod. I'm not saying it's easy, I'm just saying that's what needs to happen. Takes a little muscle on these older ones. See, like that. So set that aside, and then there's 2 more to get. There's this one here. If you grab to the farthest, what I do is I try to hook it close to where the top portion is on the side of it. That's the farthest one to reach. And then just pry it out. Hopefully I'm keeping this somewhat in frame, but I'm zoomed in enough to where you can see it. It lands. Another way to do it is to push them off with a flathead screwdriver. I think I may have better luck on this one with that method. Or, looks like I got it into the center portion. You can reach in with pliers and grab it. More than one way to skin a cat. I'm about to go for the chainsaw on this one. So anyway, you get the idea, and then pull out the sensor and then pull the shaft out and pull this off if you have to get it out. Just whatever it takes. You got to harvest this. When you look at this, look for any cracks or anything. Usually what will happen is I'll crack along here or here, or these little pads will get worn out. This one's in great shape, so we're going to go ahead and reuse it. I was having a little bit of an issue with this thing not engaging properly or holding properly, but as I get it on the workbench, I'm noticing that the dash pot for the vacuum was leaking into it and creating problems with vacuum being delivered properly. This is another good reason why you should go to a Posi-Lock. Even though you have a vacuum pump that provides vacuum at high RPMs, having a diesel, these things are just not reliable. So many problems with having vacuum problems coming off. That's why I had to zip tie them. And then finding out that this was bad and compromised and that it was getting full of oil in here. You know, I'm glad to be getting rid of this. Okay, so I did go ahead and get all the clips out. I ended up using an instrument that's designed to wrap wire together when you're setting forms. That worked the best. Next thing you need to do is you need to get a 7/8 inch wrench. Secure this. I've got it in a vise. Bust through the rust. Snap off the back securing tab. And get it to come out. This one doesn't look like it's coming out too well. Son of a gun, what a pain in the butt this is. In the instructions it says in bold letters to use force to get this to come undone. I'm beginning to experience why that's necessary. Upon closer inspection I can see that there's another E-clip that's securing it in place. So you need to take this tool once again. Just worried I'm going to rip my hand, you know, if this tool comes free and comes flying at me, so I'm going to secure this in the vise a little better. But yeah, this vacuum dash pot. Son of a gun. I'm deeply scoring this thing as I'm pulling it out. But there it is. So this should come out now. I'm going to employ the wrench to wiggle it back and forth and kind of pull back at the same time with the screwdriver or something, because it does not want to come out. That's not what you want to do. You don't want to drop it on the ground. Imagine all that work to get this out and then busting one of the little pads or fracturing this. So anyway, we've harvested this. We'll set this aside. I'll file that under the junk category or whatever. If I'm in a dire strait and need a housing or something, I guess I'd have it. Don't forget to harvest this out. You're going to need that in the new housing. That's what I'll do next. It looks to be either 7/16 or ½ inch. Looks like ½ inch is really close. Using a maybe 9/16. It's definitely ½ inch. Using all the old wrenches I got from my grandpa in Arkansas. Took me down in a cellar, and I used to work for Esco Tools, which makes the wrenches for about everybody. I mean, I've got everything from Craftsman to Mechanics Products to you name it. So anyway, got this out. I'm going to go stick it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a gap here of about a 1/2 inch. You can either screw it counterclockwise or pull it out. If you don't have, however much gap you have, there is about how much you're going to have to screw these threads into your housing right there. So we'll go ahead and do that. Also, it's time to put the little lock nut on there and screw it all the way back, and then put a little silicone on the threads as you thread this in. To thread it in, you're just going to spin this onto this. When you go to put this on, this is how it should look. Your spacer should be on. Stick your little sensor in there, seal them in with Teflon tape. Put that in on the fork, put a little silicone on the threads, and have your nut on there. And then spin this on as far as you have the slack on the gap on the Posi-Lock lever in the camera. And what I'm showing you here is I have this threaded in all the way until this bottoms out into the button there. I've got that rod all the way in as far as it goes, and as you can see, I've got my notch for my E-clip to make it stop to where it's at the disappearing point. When I slide the fork down, you can see my other 2 clips there. The one that's closest to the end here is the stop, and then the other clip is just to hold the fork into place. As you can see, I've got my forks installed. I've got all of my clips in. I've got my switch, everything's together now. I've got my nut somewhat tightened, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to silicone and put the gasket onto the axle there. Once I do that, I'll be able to put it in. And I've got my cable actuator at the top pushed in as far as it'll go till that hits. And so that'll make sure that I'm in 2-wheel drive, which gives me the most slack to put that fork here onto the collar. So here we are, all final installed. I've put all the brackets and crap back in just in case, but I don't have any wiring for my sensor. I don't know what the previous owner did, but there just isn't any. Maybe the 01 diesel didn't come with it, but whatever the case may be, I've looked and looked and haven't been able to locate it. But I've got my cable installed, I've got everything bolted up. I went ahead and put the guard shield back on just for kicks and giggles. I'm sure it won't be necessary. But there you go. I'm all Posi-Lock equipped.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section below. If you like the video, click like, and always subscribe. Thanks for watching.